Lastly, I want to talk about something a little bit more complicated than the standard architectural day rate job. So what we have here is we've been contacted by an ad agency to put together some kitchen appliance shots for a international appliance vendor. Think something like, Frigidaire or Samsung or some company like that. So they've emailed us, and we're going to read the email together, and from that email, we're going to figure out exactly what the client wants, and we're going to put together a quote based on that information. So here's our email. It's from Jen, and Jen says, "Hi Mike, my name is Jen, and I work with IPH, an ad agency based here in LA. I wanted to reach out to you to discuss working with you to produce a series of images for an appliance manufacturer that will be used in next year's advertising. Our client is an international appliance manufacturer that you've definitely heard of, and we want to create a series of images that focus on the appliances, refrigerator, oven, dishwashers, etc., while also showing some human activity in each photo. For example, somebody opening a refrigerator, pulling food out of an oven, pots boiling water, unloading and loading a dishwasher, maybe even a couple cooking together, etc. We are thinking we'll want a total of 6 to 8 shots, which we will probably use online in some internal documents. We would also like 2 to 3 hero shots, maybe one at twilight, which we will probably use in regional advertising. We aren't really quite sure which magazines or publications we will advertise in yet though. Luckily, we do have a location lined up as we've been in talks with a home design company that installed our appliances in a home in San Diego that has some amazing views over the ocean. We have a production company who we're working with who will find the talent and provide a wardrobe and catering, so for the most part, all you'll have to worry about is the photography and post-production. We've attached a brief which shows a few shots on your site that we really like the feel of, and we'd like the retouching to be similar, but of course we need to make sure that everything is perfectly polished for the ads. I've copied the art director on the email. He'll be happy to answer any questions you have about the style and direction that we want to take the shots. I think for the most part, it is all relatively self-explanatory. Right now, we're just looking for some preliminary numbers, things that can definitely be tweaked as we move forward. Thanks." So this is a pretty meaty email, and honestly, most potential clients aren't this great with spelling out all the detail in one first introductory email. What this usually takes is 2 or 3 emails for me to kind of pull out all that information. But again, for the sake of time and moving this along, I wanted to just give you an example of what a typical client might look for. But like I said, you might have to go back and forth and pull some of those details out before you start putting the estimate together. So obviously this is a bit of a more complicated job than the previous ones, and the stakes are clearly a lot higher, even though we're making many less images. Okay, now let's kind of go through and we're going to look at the big red flags here that make this jump out as a rather special job. So first of all, in her introductory email, she says, "I work for an ad agency based here in LA." That means she is working on behalf of another client to get out a new product line. So this is some pretty serious money here. And as she says, it's an international appliance manufacturer, which means they are probably going to use these pictures in many, many places, and they have to be perfectly polished to match up with their brand. Second, she says she wants to show some human activity in each photo, which is going to complicate things greatly. Now, I don't know if you've tried to put people in any of your architectural photographs. We did a few shots here in this tutorial that have people, but we didn't really spend too much time directing them, getting them dressed up, and having them do very specific things and posing them so that they complement the shot. That's going to add a lot of time and complexity to these images. Moving on, she kind of mentions she wants 6 to 8 shots, which are going to be used in online and regional advertising, and a couple of hero shots, which have to be really amazing. And she did mention that she might want to do one at twilight, which again is going to add a bit of a complexity because we have to make sure that everything is prepared and ready to go. All the models, all the wardrobes, all the styling, all the staging, everything has to be worked out and scheduled down to the very last detail to pull off that hero shot. So we're through 1.5 paragraphs here, and as you can see, this is very complicated so far. Moving right along, she says they do have a location lined up, which is not a local job. We're going to have to get in our car and drive, which is going to take probably a full day. And it's also going to tell us that we need to find hotels and rental cars and all that. So one more thing to keep note of, right? Then she does say they are working with a production company to find the talent and the wardrobe. So they've opted to hire a production company who's going to handle some of the details of this. And even though it might be nice to handle all that myself and get the paycheck, I might be pretty glad that I'm not going to have to deal with that. But really, in my mind, I'm starting to see just how much is being thrown at this job to make it happen. So I'm just going to take a minute here and point out how much things are starting to add up here. So we have a special, unique location that's a few hours drive away. We have an international kitchen manufacturer. We need 6 to 8 shots in a very complicated hero shot. We have talent and wardrobe, and the price for that, again, all this is adding up. There's a production company involved. They're probably going to take care of the craft services and catering. So think of all the money that's getting thrown at this. Lots of moving pieces, lots to take into consideration. Next, she mentions that she's put together a little brief and she's attached a few shots from my website that they really like the look of, which kind of helps me figure out what they're going for. And then In the same sentence, she says, we like the retouching that you've done, but of course we have to make sure that everything is perfectly polished for the advertisement. So again, they're kind of kicking it up a notch and they want all those blemishes taken out. They probably want nice, perfect gradients on the appliances. And of course, all the people have to be retouched as well. So next up, she mentions that she copied in the art director on this email, which again, just how one sentence tells me complexity is going up. That means there's going to be multiple people on location. I'm going to be reporting to an art director. He's going to have his own ideas of where we want to go. That means I'm going to have to make phone calls to this guy and figure out just exactly what he has in mind so that our visions kind of mesh and align. So the planning really starts to get heavy the more and more people that get involved. Also knowing that there's an art director, he's most likely going to be on set, which means I have to figure out some sort of tethering solution that is going to allow me to shoot, and probably have to run cable to a trailer or a client who will also be checking off the shots as we shoot them. That means I'm going to have to involve a digital tech as well to run the whole digital side of things, because that production has also just got far more complicated than just a regular Cam Ranger and iPad. Right now we're just looking for some preliminary numbers. Things can definitely be tweaked as we move forward. So that means I don't need to be very super exact, but I do have to give them an idea, especially with regards to image use and licensing. So knowing all of that, we know we're not just working for one single architect. We're not, being buddies on the day and having fun shooting a low-key 15-image project. We're dealing with ad agencies and art directors and production companies and wardrobes and stylists, and the list goes on and on and on. So the production value here is much, much higher. The pressure factor is much higher. And look, they're probably going to be throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars at this. And if I were to just come back with my regular $5,000 day rate and think that I could ever possibly pull this off for that price, they would probably laugh at me and move on to the next guy immediately. So before we jump into BlinkBid, I just want to mention that an email like this is something I've got more than a few times in the past, and I've had jobs like this, and I want to kind of explain to you the difference between jobs like this and jobs that are one-day architectural shoots that are much more low-key. All of the shoots that we've done on this tutorial, like I can show up with pizza and everything for the crew, and things would be totally fine. But on the last big advertising shot I did, they had a catering truck. They had like a giant trailer, an RV, that comes out, and the whole thing folds up and the food comes out, and it's just crazy over the top. And they have a private chef that is hired for the day to make breakfast, lunch, and then dinner, because we were there for 12 hours. And if you think, how much money is just going into this food, the craft services truck, think about the location scout who had to come out and drive out here and figure out where we were going to shoot. Think about the talent that had to be cast. You had to have someone sit down at a desk and have people walk in front of him with certain wardrobes on before they selected talent. And I've done shoots where we had to actually pay to shut down the store that we were shooting so the owner would remain happy while we were taking photos, and that cost thousands of dollars as well. So if I put in a bid that's like just in the mid-thousands, they're going to laugh at me, and they're probably never going to call me back because they know I don't have what it takes to really handle a job like this. All right, so now that we know all of this information, let's go into BlinkBid and put together a reasonable estimate taking into consideration all of those factors. Okay, so here we are in BlinkBid, and I've just gone ahead and created our job, and of course I've filled out the job name, contact information, and the job description. So I'm gonna go ahead and click create, and we're gonna have our new job that we can start working on. So as I have done on the previous two estimates, I'm gonna go ahead over here to my little blue box, and I'm just gonna go down the list and add things that I know we're gonna need. So I know there's going to be a photographer's fee. I know there's obviously going to be post-production. I know that there's going to be usage fees. I know that we are not dealing with the casting, so I can skip over that. I know that we're going to have a digital tech because we have a much more complicated digital situation on location. When you work for ad agencies, they most of the time require that you are immediately backing up the assets that you've created on location. So there can be a hard drive handover at the end of the day. So if the worst case situation happens and Armageddon occurs, someone somewhere has a backup of all the images made on that day. So we're going to have a digital tech, right? We're going to have probably more than just one normal assistant. I would say we're going to have a first assistant, and we're probably also going to have a second assistant, right? I need one assistant who's going to help me when I can just say, all right, put a B1 on a stand, put a reflector dish on it, and a quarter CTO gel. Boom, that can be done immediately. There's probably going to be someone who's also going to want to go ahead and take care of the styling for me. So when I say, okay, move that towel or straighten out that can or whatever, they're going to be on it, and I don't have to bother my lighting assistant or my digital tech to do that. So we're going to have a first assistant, a second assistant, and a digital tech. All right, now we have our photographer's fees and our crew. Let's keep going on a little bit down here. We may need to provide insurance, but I generally don't bill for it. All it is really a matter of calling up your insurance agent and asking for a COI or a certificate of insurance to make sure that there is liability insurance and you are covered for the location and of course if anything happens on set. I'm already insured and I use Hill & Usher. They have, if you're in America, they have amazing policies for photographers and they come highly recommended. So in most cases, there's also a gear rental fee because a lot of the time you're going to have to rent some extra gear that you don't already own. Now, when jobs get this big, it is relatively common for you to rent your equipment back to the production. Now, if you own a studio or you own the gear, it's kind of like a bonus for you because you would be paying for that anyway, so you can actually rent it to the production and recoup some costs that way. Now, if this sounds strange to you, think of it like this. If they wanted to shoot in a studio, you would say, that sounds great. Let's go find a studio to rent to shoot in. Or if you own the studio, would you bill for the time? Of course you would. So the same thing is true of the equipment, the photo equipment that we're actually going to be using. All right, we are moving along here. And now we're down to the travel part of the estimate here. And I know that we're going to be driving pretty far, and I know we're going to have a hotel. So let's go ahead and add hotels. And we're going to have meals involved, parking tolls, gas, and mileage. So I've got my 3 travel line items here, and I also want to bill a day rate for travel. So I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to add another line item from the top here. This I'm actually just going to call travel. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And lastly, I'm going to add a scout day because I'm guessing if we're going to be doing all this work, we're going to want to see the location ahead of time and make a plan with the agency and client on location beforehand. So I'm going to add a tech/scout day, and that's pretty much going to be everything that we're going to have to fill in for this estimate. Now, before I start throwing in numbers here, let me just make a quick note. It seems like there's a lot of line items on here, and that's true, but I know that it's an advertising agency. They're going to want to negotiate. It's okay if you have some items that might look redundant, so when they do come back to negotiate with you, you can remove and add things accordingly. Okay, so we have a pretty good list of things here that we can go ahead and fill out. I'm going to close out of this, and let's start at the top. Let's start with our photographer's fee. So I know this is going to be a one-day shoot, and the stakes are quite a bit higher than our regular day rate job. So let's go ahead and click on that. And this is where you really need to use your judgment, and you need to think of a number. What is it about you and your work that makes you special, and what is that worth? Now, this is kind of a difficult number. I don't have all the answers. You've got to kind of rely on your experience to come up with. But looking back at all the information we have and knowing all the money that's going into this, you kind of have to consider all the work that you're going to be doing. It's not just like it's one day of work and you're done. You're going to be on the phone constantly. You're going to be dealing with art directors. You're going to be making your own plan. There's a lot more that goes into this than just a simple day rate job. I'm estimating that this is probably going to take at least 2 to 3 days out of my life, plus a little bit of that intangibles factor. What makes your images you? What makes your pictures special and different than everyone else's? You need to work on coming up with a number for that. And in this case, I think a fair fee for this, with a relatively high pressure job, taking into account all that's going into this job, I think a decent fee for this is probably in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 for a day rate. So I'm going to call this, we'll go with $12,500. It's going to be one day, and this is photographer's day rate and creative fee. Go ahead and click save. So let's move to post-production here. Now, on some advertising jobs, the agency might have an in-house post-production team, and your job might just be to take the pictures. But they did say that they like my retouching, so I'm going to assume that they want me to do it. I'm going to go ahead and put a line item in here for that. Now, I know it's 6 to 8 pictures, and I know that they said they want really, really high-end perfect retouching, and to do great retouching on architectural images is more complicated than meets the eye, as you know. I'm guessing that it will at least probably take 5 to 8 hours for each one of these images. Now, if you remember back to our previous jobs, my day rate and retouching were pretty much equal, but I know I'm going to have to do some really amazing retouching on this, and they might have some specific requests that are more than just color correction and blending exposures. So I'm going to come up with a number that makes sense, and I know that each one of these pictures is probably going to take, I'm just guessing 4 to 6 hours, maybe a little bit more on the more complicated ones. So I'm going to come up with a number, and I think maybe like $750 per image is a fair number for this. So you have to come up with kind of a mental rate for what is your retouching worth, and I would say I would charge, if someone came to me and wanted me to do retouching, I would say between maybe $150 and $175 an hour for me to just do my retouching. Again, you have to look at your skill level and where you fit into the market for this. So I'm going to say $750 for each image, and there's going to be 6 to 8, so we'll just call this 8. Again, I'm going to pad it a little bit because if they come back to me and want to change, I know what I can reduce number-wise here. So I'm going to say post-production on 8 select images and go ahead and click save. So another reason that the retouching rate isn't the same as the day rate here is that I don't really have to do any planning for the retouching. I'm not running, calculations and scenarios through my head for days in front of this job. I'm really just sitting down in front of a computer. It's not super complicated. Okay, so now that we have our day rate established and our retouching established, let's go ahead and deal with our usage fees. Like I explained in the previous jobs, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at the media kits of local magazines. I'm going to maybe look at 5 or 10 of them, figure out an average circulation, and plug those numbers into some stock imaging websites to find a nice number for our regional print ad usage for our 3 hero shots. And the number that I came up with averaged about $2,800, so I'm going to charge $2,800 times 3 for each of those hero shots. So we'll go ahead and click on our first usage fees here, and it's going to be 3 of them at $2,800, and I'll call this full page regional print advertising for hero shots 3 total. All right, go ahead and click save. But I know that they also wanted some internal use and some web advertising as well. So I'm going to add 2 more usage fees. And I did the same formula for these other fees as well. And what I came out to was we have 8 images, which are going to be used internally. And the rate for that was about $550 per image. So 8 images used internally. Click save. And lastly, we have our internet advertising, again, which was 8 images. So we'll go 8. And the fees for that was $1,300 total. Now, this seems pretty high, and I am giving them exactly by the book what they asked for, and I know that they're going to come back at me and they're going to negotiate a little bit. And rather, I know they're going to negotiate a lot bit. So I need to go and I need to make sure that I have everything accounted for because I know that this number is going to be eroded once they see this and they come back. I would be thrilled if they went with this, but I have a feeling, like I said, I went for the highest number that they gave me in every instance. They said 6 to 8 images, I billed them for 8. They said 2 to 3 hero shots, I'm billing them for 3. They might want to revise these numbers and change their usage, and I'd be happy to give them the deal if they do so. And I don't even really know specifically where they're looking to advertise, so they're going to come back and they might give us specifics which could make that number go down significantly, or they could say, hey, we want to put these on the back cover of Time magazine for a year, and they could go up even more. So we're just going to leave these and give them exactly what they asked for, and we'll negotiate those numbers more specifically later. So the next up is the tech in the scout day. This is basically exactly what it sounds like. This is you checking out the location, making sure that everything works as it should, making sure that you and the art director are on the same page, making sure that you have all your shots relatively lined up and pre-envisioned. I might take some test shots, might go over some things with the art director, and I might even put together a quick PDF right there just to make sure that we have a shot list that we can check off on the day as we go through. So for that, I charge $1,000. All right, so next up, we've got to take care of our crew, right? Now, a digital tech, this is an interesting one. It's something that is the next level up from using a Cam Ranger and an iPad. When you're doing a production like this, you're going to have an art director and you're going to have a client on set who want to see the images as they are created. Again, there's a lot of money at stake. Everybody wants to be on the same page. And I've done jobs where you have the computer shooting tethered into a laptop in a hood so that you can see it out in the sun. You've kind of got a cart and everything. You're running power. And then I've done shoots where you have 2 laptops and you've got Thunderbolt cable wired up so that you can kind of work on a shot and edit it and then drag it to the second monitor, which is going to pop up in front of the art director and the client, and everything will be good to go. So this is something that is really, you don't want to be dealing with this on the day. You don't want to be running around making sure that your tethered capture is in line, making sure that your iPads for the client is in line. If you're using Capture One Pilot, you can give your clients iPads as well. It's just a step up from the Cam Ranger, a bit more professional, and I prefer to have someone who knows what they're doing run that rather than have me deal with it. Another thing that the digital tech is going to do is they're going to back up images as they are created. You're going to have an external hard drive, and every time you're wrapping one shot, they're going to move all those files to that hard drive, which again, I have generally handed off to the client or one of my assistants to take that a separate direction at the end of the shoot so that all of the files are intact. Now, the going rate that I have paid for a digital tech is $1,250. It might be different depending on your market. You're going to have to do some research and figure that one out. One thing I want to mention about the digital tech is that standard rate for a digital tech without the workstation seems to be between $400 and $700, but I like them to bring their equipment, because if you show up with your own equipment and it turns out that you need more cable than you own, well, you're on the hook for that. And if a digital tech is properly prepared, they will have all the tools that they need to make a tethering setup like that happen for a shoot like this. Then we have a first assistant. My assistant rate is either $450 or $300 depending. I think they're going to be working hard all day long, so I'm going to give them $450 on this job. And again, this is just to basically translate my instructions into action. So if I say, I need a ProPhoto B1 with a Beauty Edition, a quarter cut of CTO on it, I want it feathered into the window to make some natural light, who's going to know what I'm talking about? I need a well-trained assistant who knows all of my gear inside and out. And I think that's a relatively valuable thing to have. So I'm going to pay $450 for that. Now my second assistant might not know as much, might not be as important as the first assistant, and I'm not going to have them doing crazy stuff. So the going rate for that is, I find, about $300 a day. And we're going to go ahead and click save. So last up, we have our equipment rental. Now the equipment rental is relatively straightforward. You can go to your local rental house website, Adorama or B&H or whatever, and see what they're charging for the equipment that you would use for the full day. And I'm not going to go through and do this piece by piece, but we're going to say that might be like $1,300. So, and that is going to be equipment rental for production, and we're going to click save. And last up, we have our travel. Again, this should be pretty straightforward by now. I'm guessing that we have, we're going to need hotel for what? We got 4 crew, so we're going to need 2 hotel rooms for 2 nights, and those are going to be about $140 a piece, so that's 4 hotel nights for 4 crew. So I like to come in somewhat simple on the hotel budget. This is $140 a night for 2 rooms, 2 people each room, which is relatively fair, but I've had jobs where they've actually come back and they've said, we want a nicer hotel, we're going to put everybody in the same hotel, and they've put us all in our own room in like a $350 a night hotel. So again, really depends on the client, on the agency. Think that your client is going to be wanting to impress their client as well, and they're not going to put them in a super cheap hotel. So this is something that you got to kind of play around with. All right, next up we have meals and parking, gas, and mileage. Now the meals, I could go either way on this. I remember back in our email, we said we had a craft services thing, but what I'm gonna do, I know that there's travel involved, so I'm gonna add a very modest meal budget of maybe like $50 per person for 1 day. So it's not gonna be too crazy. So in here, we're just going to do $50 per day per meal for 4 people. Click save. And lastly, we have these parking, tolls, gas, and mileage fee. The way I like to do this is I'm going to just calculate the distance that I will be driving from LA to San Diego, and I'm going to multiply that by the IRS mileage rate, which for 2016, I believe is 56 cents per mile. I don't know what that is in any other part of the world, but I do know that other countries have a very similar thing, and that is basically what the government has said is the standard mileage reimbursement rate. So I've done some back-of-the-napkin math here. I know that this trip is going to be about 300 miles round trip. So I'm going to multiply that by 0.56, and that comes out to $168. And this is basically just the government rate reimbursing me for my mileage here. So this is IRS mileage from Los Angeles to San Diego. And we're going to go ahead and click save. All right, and that is basically our completed estimate. All right, so let's take a minute and add all these numbers up. And as you can see, it's a pretty big number down there, $47,400, right? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and send this off with the expectation, because this is how this world works, that the client is gonna come back and say, we need to adjust things here and there, and we found out that the circulation isn't so high, and it's gonna kind of be refined down. And I would be very happy and thoroughly expect this job to land somewhere in the $30,000 to $35,000 range after all the negotiation is done. However, if I had come in with a bid that's $10,000 for all of this, there is just no way I wouldn't want to be involved in it, because, well, honestly, who wants to do all of that work for such little pay? And the agency would just laugh at me because they know how much is being spent on everything related to this shoot. So let's pretend that the agency comes back and they said, whoa, we gotta cut this bid down a little bit. So let's walk through and think about some things that we could reduce to kind of make this fall more in line with their budget. First things first here, photographer's fee. I don't really want to concede on that, because I'm going to be doing the same amount of work no matter what on my photographer's fee. I'm going to be there for a full day. There's going to be tons of planning. It's going to be high stress. And I think it's going to look pretty bad if I just slashed the photographer's fee in half. It's going to make them think that I don't really think that highly of my work. And I do want to protect that, so I'm going to leave that alone. The post-production fee, I'm also I'm comfortable leaving that where it is because if you go to any high-end retouching agency in LA or New York or London and you ask what their rates are for high-end commercial work, it's probably going to be at least $200 an hour. So again, I'm going to leave that there. I feel like that's relatively fair. Now, we're going to get into the usage fees and that sort of thing, but before I do that, they might say, instead of 8 images, what if we wanted to get 6 final images? Now, that's immediately going to knock a lot of these numbers down pretty far. So what we can do, we can take off 8 post-productions, we can move that to 6, right? So I'll change that quantity to 6 and hit save. That's going to save them $1,500 right there. And maybe they want to do, instead of 3 hero shots, maybe they want to do 2. So we'll go down to 2 hero shots and click save. That's going to save them almost $3,000 right there. And let's say instead of 8 usage fees here, maybe they want 6. Again, we're going to do 2 less images. And so we're just going to knock these usage fees down a little bit. And go ahead and click save. Now, one thing that I'm going to do, even if they've reduced their final image count, because I've left that photographer's fee the same, I'm still going to work my ass off on the day. I'm going to shoot as many pictures as I can. And this, some photographers might not agree with me, but I really want to go the extra mile, and I'm going to deliver a couple extra images. And if they decide that in the end they do want to buy those final 8 images, they will have the option to do so, which will put some more money back in my pocket. I still think there's a couple things that we could adjust. If they came back to us and they said, we have a very specific usage in mind. Remember, I gave them I cast a really wide net on that usage. I wanted to kind of cover everything. Let's say they come back and they say, we're going to do 1 magazine or 2 magazines and the circulation is going to be a little bit lower than you predicted. We'll say, okay, so maybe that licensing fee might come down to like $2,300 instead of $2,800. And we'll go ahead and click save there. So now we've almost dropped this $10,000 at this point, and we really haven't conceded all that much. We're doing a little bit less work, but we're still kind of getting paid the same for the amount of work we're doing. And it's not like these numbers are final. Even though I'm slashing some of these licensing fees, it may turn out that they want to continue using the images, or in a perfect world, they see the images and they love them, and they want to use them more than they had originally planned. So I'm not too worried about that. And like I said, I have not conceded my photographer's fee and my retouching fee, which means I'm getting paid fairly for the work that I'm putting into this. Okay, so as you can see, guys, we shaved this from $47,000 down to $38,000. So we've saved almost $10,000 here, and we really haven't given up any of our rights, any of our photographer's fees or anything like that. So you are really able to kind of move up and down and negotiate when you start at a higher number. Okay, so we're pretty close to being done here, and I'm looking at this and I think, you know, everything for the most part looks pretty good, but honestly, like, I was doing a little bit of thinking and I thought, you know, I was modeling this in my head as I kind of came up with this. I was modeling this on a real job I did, and that real job was a little bit more intensive. We actually delivered almost 20 images in one day, which, as you can imagine, would take even more crazy prep than this. And since this is only a 6 to 8 image day, I'm actually going to knock down this photographer's fee. I think something more in the range of like $7,500, $8,000 is more realistic, which is 3 times my normal day rate, because I do think this is still, even though it's only 6 to 8 pictures, going to take a significant amount more of planning than it would for a regular architectural shoot. So let's put that at $7,500. And again, I hope that you kind of see, like, that isn't the biggest deal. We've only really knocked off like maybe like 10% of the bid, not even by doing that. The big purpose of this here is to see what really goes into one of these estimates and all the different things that I'm looking at and considering, rather than just throwing across and spitting back at them my regular $5,000 standard photography rate, which would not work for a shit like this. You would just get laughed at when you sent your estimate in. All right, so hopefully you guys can see what goes into pricing one of these huge commercial jobs. And I don't want you to look at this and say, oh my God, he's making $38,000 in one day. These jobs can sometimes take 6 months from conception to completion. It's really a ton of work to get all the pieces in place and have it all come together. So it's not like it's 38 grand of pure profit. There is a lot of time, energy, effort, and expense that goes into these projects. Now, you may think some of this stuff is extravagant and could easily be cut, like, for example, the digital tech, but the client and the art director expect that they'll be able to see these shots on the big screen. And again, think of how much money is being invested in this campaign. They want to make sure everything is perfect, and it's going to be very difficult on a little iPad screen to make sure that everything is in place. It might be fine for a quick preview for me, but for a client who's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on these ads, they don't want to miss anything. And if you shoot and you get all the way back home and you miss this little thing that's going to be a nightmare in post because you weren't shooting tethered, you're going to regret that. So it's stuff like that that really seems excessive, but is super important to have. So you might think that you're doing a client a favor by shaving some of this stuff off, but they might think that you're not even ready to handle this job if you don't offer these services. All right, so we're going to send this off, and who knows, they might come back in a couple of days and say, you know, we're looking at this and we need to revise some numbers, we need to come down a little bit. And that is the way this works. It's really push and pull. None of these jobs, in my experience, are really lost after one bid that is a little bit too high or a little bit out of the budget. There's always room for negotiation, and it's almost expected in these jobs. But now that you've seen how it's put together, you kind of know where to start, what you can kind of put in your invoices to make you seem like you're ready to handle these huge jobs without throwing numbers at the wall and just guessing about this. Now guys, remember, while we're putting this together, it may be true that there are 3 or 4 or 5 other photographers bidding on the same project. We might not win, and it totally sucks, don't get me wrong, it happens all the time. That being said, it is very important that you don't underbid this, because the agency might see that you underbid hugely, and they're not going to come back because they don't think you're ready to handle a job like this. But if you overbid it, what's going to happen is they might still come back to you when they have a little bit more budget. They obviously like your work because they came to you in the first place, so it's almost more dangerous to underbid than to overbid on these big jobs. So I hope seeing all of this will help you better understand how to bid on different types of architectural photography jobs. You really have to learn from experience, and look, I've taken years of trial and error, and I have screwed some things up so hilariously badly, and I've gotten some things very, very right. It takes time, a lot of effort, and a lot of thinking to put this all together. You're not going to learn all of this overnight, and you're probably going to have to use your other photographer friends and a lot of resources to bounce ideas off and put these quotes together. But over time, as you win some and you lose more, you'll kind of start to figure out what works, and you'll be better able to put these quotes together and hopefully end with good results.